What is up, guys? It's your boy, Hard Cactus. Anyways, today we are going to be discussing how Bungie is making Destiny 2 harder with the launch of the Lightfall expansion arriving very soon. Now, raising the difficulty of the game was actually a goal that they talked about within their massive State of the Game yearly article, where they really outlined all the things coming in 2023. But more recently, they released an article detailing exactly, what the things they are doing to raise the difficulty are next season. So let's get started here. First of all, you have the basics of high difficulty activities. Adept difficulty is being removed from the game. Now you're going to have hero difficulty, and that will be available at 1750 power, which is the soft cap, and this is kind of just announcing it. Then we have legend and master difficulties, and those can be entered in once you hit 1800, which is the power cap. So a quick explanation of those two important caps here. For those who may not be aware, when Lightfall launches, you're going to be pretty massively underleveled. Originally, any piece of loot you get, like a random blue from an enemy, is going to help you progress in power level up to 1750. Once you reach that point, only powerful gear that drops from powerful sources will get you the rest of the way to 1800. So there you have it. And the activity levels for Season 20 next season, Hero is 1770, Legend is 1830, and Master is 1840. But they continue. We're implementing power level disadvantages to provide a better challenge curve. So when in a hero activity, you're going to be put at -5 power levels, Legend is -15, Master is -20, and then specifically Grandmaster Nightfalls is -25. So the important thing about those different values is that it doesn't matter where you are in the power level spectrum, you're going to be put at a certain disadvantage, right? Like Grandmaster Nightfalls, you could be as much power, you could be the guy with the highest power level in the world, you're still going to be put at -25 versus the enemies to create more of a challenge. Moving on from there, match game is being completely removed from the game. Now mismatch shields will simply take 50% less damage. Then burns in high level activities are completely being removed, and they're changing into surges and threats. This is honestly going to have one of the biggest results within the game. Like, this is going to impact the builds you choose massively, because surges are going to increase your outgoing damage by 25%, specifically with elemental damage. Surges for high difficulty activities change every season based around featured damage types. So the featured surge for the entirety of Season of Defiance will be Strand. And then the weekly rotating surges will be Solar and Void. So that's very interesting how Bungie is doing that. So Strand is always going to be juiced the entire season for every single activity that has a surge. And you'll notice Stasis and Arc are left out of the equation. You'll never have an Arc surge for Season 20. And again, this is really going to impact the PvE meta for the entire season. But on the flip side, we have threats, which increase the elemental damage coming from enemies by 25%. Now, very importantly, right now with acute burns in Grandmasters, you do 25% more, solar damage, for example, but take 50% more solar damage. So the introduction of surges and threats is actually going to make things maybe a bit easier in terms of Grandmasters. Specifically, you won't be getting one shot by as many enemies. But also, they say high-level activities will also feature overcharged weapons. They say an overcharged weapon deals 25% more damage, but also kinetic damage is increased by 25% if using a surging subclass. So if the surge is void using a void subclass, Your kinetic weapon will deal more damage as well. They say overcharged weapons can come from several sources. Currently, weapons set per activity, weapons featured as champion counters on the seasonal artifact. They also say overcharges and surges don't stack, but overcharged weapons do not get extra damage if they're also surging. You only need to have one for a given damage source. But to kind of compensate for this, combatants are harder to stagger and their health has been increased across the board. This is to compensate for surge and overcharge. The effect is strongest on powerful enemies and weakest on rank and file enemies. So overall, this is a pretty interesting system. I'm not sure if it's better, but it's certainly interesting. So you have these elemental surges, but then you also have overcharged weapons. So let's say you have overcharged machine guns. It may be worth it to put on an arc machine gun, even though the surge is, strand, right? But I would actually prefer if overcharges were just a slight damage bonus, 10%, but they did stack, right? It seems really fun in terms of build crafting to combine, we have a void surge and also machine guns are overcharged. Let me find the best void machine gun I have to gain the biggest advantage. That seems a lot more fun to me than this current outline of all these different modifiers right here, but we will have to see. But moving on from there, guys, they have a section on what's not changing. Equipment is still locked on Legend and Master difficulties as well as Grandmasters. Matchmaking is still available on Hero, but closed on pretty much everything else. Modifiers that affect enemy types, so Pitfire for example, or Fire Team Coordination, Chaff, Togetherness are still around. Champion availability remains the same. Grandmaster Nightfall, Revive limitations, and wipe conditions and schedule stay the same. Okay, but moving on from there, Bungie outlines some big changes to strikes, or rather the Vanguard Ops playlist. So, Lake of Shadows and Arms Dealer are being updated with new enemies, new encounters, new mechanics, and new objectives. They're gonna be more difficult, you can't just spam through them. Also, they say we're working on adjusting other strikes like Exodus Crash and the Inverted Spire. Their presence is gonna be dramatically reduced, so you won't get those two as often, and they won't be a part of Nightfall rotations until later. Specifically with the playlist itself, PsyOps Battlegrounds and Heist Battlegrounds are going to be a part of the Vanguard Ops playlist. The playlist now is power disabled like Gambit and Crucible. This means you won't have a damage advantage over the enemies or them upon you, no matter what your power level is. The daily rotators and weekly singes have been removed and replaced with one random weekly surge and one random daily threat. Also, one daily random modifier from our Best Of collection, including Subtle Foes, Lightning Crystals, and more will be added. But also, guys, strike scoring is returning, so they're adding it to the Vanguard Ops playlist. Just like Nightfalls, you will earn points for killing enemies and other events, precision kills, picking up orbs, reviving, etc., with a multiplier based on the specific strike. The higher your score, the larger your Vanguard rank multiplier will be. So you get a 1x multiplier on Vanguard rank earned for getting below 30,000. The multiplier increases every 5,000 points after the initial 30,000, and the largest multiplier available is 7 times for getting over 250,000, and this applies to all Vanguard modes, including Nightfalls. Guys, this is such a fantastic change because Bungie just overhauled how we all play strikes. Right now, you're trying to run through strikes as quickly as possible. There is no advantage to killing a bunch of enemies, doing anything other than beating it as fast as possible. It just becomes such a brain-numbing activity. But now with strike scoring, you're going to want to get a high score. You're going to want to slay out on enemies as much as possible. It's going to make strikes so much more engaging. It's also going to make all of the annoying strikes that have a bunch of enemies and take longer, something like Proving Grounds, actually more desirable because you have the chance to get much more score because there's so much more enemies within it. Again, I think this is a great change. You want more score, you want to be slaying out because it gives you so much more reputation. Moving on from there, they also have something called Vanguard challenges. So the Vanguard screen challenges are being adjusted to reflect these changes. To complete the weekly Vanguard challenge, you will now need to complete Vanguard challenge activities with a surging subclass. It can either be the seasonal surge for Nightfalls or the Vanguard Ops weekly surge, and you can complete 5 activities. You get increased progress for harder difficulties. A single Grandmaster Nightfall completes this challenge. But next up, there's a big section on Nightfalls specifically. So they say Battlegrounds will slowly become part of the Nightfall playlist, starting with Mars Heist Battleground. Yeah, that's going to be intense. But also there's 2 surges available, threats dependent on the featured Nightfall, 1 featured overcharged weapon, combatants are harder to stagger and have more health, and there's different activity levels for Season 20, with Hero 1770, Legend 1830, Master 1840, and Grandmaster is also at 1840, and we have those same power delta disadvantages as we looked at earlier, and the maximum effectiveness targets means that Hero, if you're 1765, like you're good to go, you're not going to be under leveled at all. Legend 1815, Master 1820, and Grandmaster 1815. Again, because you don't have to be as much of a power level because you get that big minus power level disadvantage. Now, the Nightfall Weekly Challenge now requires you to attain 200,000 points across multiple Nightfall runs rather than 100,000 points in a single run. That might get annoying. But next up, we have Raid and Dungeons getting the power level delta treatment. So now, with the master difficulty experience for Dungeons and Raids, here are the changes. There's going to be 1 overcharged weapon, 2 surges, no threat modifier, combatants don't have increased health or increased stagger resistance. We want to bring them into line with other master experiences without the need to buildcraft towards surges or overcharges. That seems a lot easier perhaps, unless of course you have to consider the fact that Master is now going to be minus 20, hence the no threat modifier, I would imagine. Moving on from there, you have no activity left behind, except for Gambit, they don't talk about that at all. So for Lost Sectors, there's going to be 1 overcharged weapon, 2 surges, threats dependent on the Lost Sector, combatants are harder to stagger and have more health. It's available in Legend and Master difficulties, and Lost Sectors will feature plus 20 combat delta rather than minus 15 or minus 20. That seems a bit weird. But they say we're monitoring completion rates and times during Season 20 to see if exotic engram drop rates need to be adjusted. There will be additional paths to acquiring Lightfall exotic armors that you will discover on the release of Lightfall as well, so you're not necessarily going to have to just farm Lost Sectors. Moving on from there, with Nightmares, Empire Hunts, and Campaign Weekly Missions, you're going to have 1 overcharged weapon, 2 weekly rotating surges, threats dependent on the type of activity, combatants are harder to stagger and have more health, and the difficulty options available are the following. Then with Dares of Eternity and Wellspring, 2 rotating overcharged weapons, weekly rotating surges, 1 threat, combatants are harder to stagger and have more health actually, available in Legend difficulty on Dares of Eternity and Master on Wellspring, and you have Extinguished activated on Master. Teams can wipe on a time limit if an objective is failed. And then guys, for the seasonal battleground playlists, it shares the difficulty settings for Season 19's Heist Battlegrounds. So hero difficulty with minus 5 power level, the weekly rotating surge, same one as Vanguard Ops playlist, rotating threats, no overcharged weapons, and combatants will have a reduced health scaling and regular stagger resistance. Whew! So some very, very interesting changes. Certainly having to get used to this new Surges, overcharged, and threat system is again going to be a huge part in determining PvE builds next season, but overall this all sounds very interesting but also very concerning. I really don't know how this is going to play out. I'm just going to have to play it for myself and wait and see. What do you guys think of these changes? Do you think that this is good? We're moving towards the game getting a bit more challenging and engaging, or do you think that this is just going to make the grind so much worse and more annoying? Let me know in the comment section down below. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, found it informative, and if you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Destiny 2 content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. If you want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickCacus. That is linked in the description down below. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.